Hey guys, tonight we journey into the heart of the Imperium's cruelest mercy. We are going to explore the soul-crushing experience of being condemned, not to death, but to service in a penal legion. You can feel the recycled, sterile air of the judgment hole filling your lungs. Each breath a final, futile protest, the Arbeitsverdict, hose in the cavernous chamber, a sound that strips away your name, your past, and your future in a single, brutal sentence. The good news is, you've been spared a quick execution. The bad news, you'll spend every moment from this point on praying for one. Frankly, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. The word rings in your ears, louder than any ordnance explosion you can imagine. Service, not death, not the clean, final snapper. A noose or the sterile hum of a lost shot to the back of the head. Service. It's a word that should contain hope, a chance at redemption. But in the cold, echoing hall of imperial justice, it feels like a curse far worse than oblivion. You stand there now, as the black-robed Justicar moves on to the next case without a second glance. Your crime. It doesn't matter anymore. Maybe you stole bread to feed your family in the underhive. Maybe you deserted your guidepost in a moment of sheer human terror. Or maybe you were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Your name pulled from hell is to meet a quota. The Imperium is a vast, grinding machine, and it does not care for the specifics of the grid caught in its gears. It only cares that the machine keeps running. You are dragged from the dock, your arms pinned by armor, enforcers whose faces are hidden behind impassive helmets. There is no gentleness, no recognition of you as a person. You are cargo now. You're herded down sterile corridors and thrown into the back of a transport vehicle. The heavy metal door slams shut, plunging you into near total darkness. The air thick with the stench of unwashed bodies and raw fear. As your eyes adjust, you see them, the others, a dozen souls packed into a space meant for half that number. A hulking ganger with kill marks tattooed on his face glares from one corner. A disgraced naval officer, his uniform stripped of all insignia, weeps silently in another. A skinny youth, barely a man, shivers uncontrollably, his eyes wide with a terror you know is reflected in your own. These are your new brothers in arms, the damned. The disposable dot. The journey is a blur of jolts, rumbles, and the muffled shouts of your captors. Time loses all meaning. It could be hours, it could be days. When the doors finally grind open, the sudden, harsh light is blinding. You stumble out onto a vast ferrocrete plain under a sky the color of dirty rust. The air itself is heavy, tasting of industrial pollutants and despair. Before you stands a monolithic structure, a fortress prison of grey metal and gunmetal grey rockreed, pockmarked with watchtowers and crowned with razor wire. This is where your atonement begins. As you and the other convicts are forced into ragged lines, the figure emerges from the fortress gate. He moves with an unnatural calm, his stark contrast to the brutal efficiency of the guards. He is tall, clad in a perfectly tailored officer's coat, the black fabric unblemished by the filth of this world. His face is sharp, intelligent, and utterly devoid of warmth. One of his hands is a master-crafted bionic, its chrome fingers drumming a soft, rhythmic tattoo against his thigh. This is Colonel Jaron Schaffer. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. A chilling silence falls over the assembled prisoners as he begins to speak. His tone conversational, almost pleasant. Your lives. He begins, his gaze sweeping across your faces, a forfeit. You have sinned against the Emperor and the Imperium of man. By law, you should all be executed. He pauses, letting the weight of that truth settle upon you. But the Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, is merciful. He offers you a gift, a singular opportunity to wash your slate clean. Not with prayers, not with penitence in a cell, but with blood. He pieces before you, his bionic hand glinting in the sickly light. You will serve in the 13th Penal Legion, my legion. You will be sent to the galaxy's most unforgiving warzones to fight the Imperium's most desperate battles. You will be asked to do the impossible, to face the unthinkable. Most of you will die. He says it so matter-of-factly, like discussing crop yields or production quotas. But your deaths will have meaning. Each shot you fire, each meter of ground you take, each breath you spend in service to him on terror. It will be a mark against your sin. Die well, and you will die forgiven. You are the last chance the Imperium will ever give you. You are my last chances. The words are meant to inspire, to forge you into weapons of faith. He speaks of age, honor, of duty, of absolution. But as you look into his cold, calculating eyes, you see the lie. There is no mercy here. There is no forgiveness. There is only a grim arithmetic. He is not a savior offering redemption. He is a quartermaster, calculating the most efficient way to spend a fresh shipment of ammunition, and you and every other soul standing on this desolate plain are just that, ammunition. Your life is no longer your own. Its end has already been decided. The only question left is how, and for what meaningless objective, it will be spent. Colonel Sheffer's words hang in the polluted air long after he has turned and walked back into the fortress. There is no applause, no defeat, shout, just the dead silence of 200 souls, simultaneously realizing the true nature of their damnation. The illusion of a second chance has been replaced by the certainty of a calculated death. Before you can fully process this, the gods are on you, their shock mauls cracking against the backs of those who move too slowly. You are herded like Grok's beasts toward the yawning gates of the induction facility, the first steps of your new life taken at the end of a weapon. Inside, the fortress is a symphony of industrial misery. The air is a cocktail of harsh chemical cleaners, hot metal, and the ever-present stench of fear. You are shoved into a cavernous chamber where your dehumanization begins in earnest. Strip. A god with a face like a clenched fist bellows, his voice distorted by a box grill. You and the others obey, shedding the tattered clothes that were the last link to your past lives. A fine suit from a spire noble, Libra's stained overalls, a hiver's patched synth leather jacket, all of it is piled together and fed into a roaring incinerator. You watch the flames consume the last physical remnants of the person you once were, the smoke rising to join the perpetual smog outside. Next comes the cleansing. You are forced under high-pressure sprays of ice-cold, foul-smelling liquid that strips the dirt and oil from your skin with brutal efficiency. Your head is shaved by humming servo clippers that leave angry red welts on your scalp. Every part of you is scrubbed, scoured, and sterilized. If your very identity were a contagion that needed to be purged. Once you are deemed clean, you are issued the uniform of the damned, a single-piece, rough-spun jumpsuit the color of dried blood and ash. The fabric is coarse, abrasive, and itches constantly. It is a hair shirt for the soul, a constant, physical reminder of your lowly status. Then comes the moment that truly severs you from your past. You are lined up before a desk, where a dour-faced scribe sits with a data slate. He doesn't ask for your name. He doesn't care. He looks at the code on a TAGUW, given, and taps it into his device. Designation 734 Tango Kilo 9. He grunts, his voice bored. That is you now. His string of numbers and letters. You are then pushed forward to the next STA. Shun, where two hulking orderlies hold you down. A third approaches with a thermocaudry brand. Its tip glowing a malevolent orange. The searing pain as it presses against the flesh below your collar. Bone is blinding. You smell your own skin, burning, and the brand leaves behind a permanent, ugly scar of your new designation. You are not just numbered. You are marked as property. Final, and most terrifying, part of your induction is the collar. A guard clamps a heavy, segmented ring of cold iron around your neck. It locks with a definitive, echoing click. The weight of it is immediate, a constant pressure, a physical yoke of servitude. It's not for decoration. You see the small, blinking activation light on the side and you understand. This is your leash, or a sergeant, even the colonel himself, can detonate the shaped charge within it at any time, for any reason. Insubordination, cowardice, moving too slowly. It is a constant, intimate threat, a metal hand, wrapped permanently round your throat. It is in the midst of this final degradation, as you are being shoved from the coring station into a holding pen, that your foot scuffs again, saying something on the grimy floor. Your eyes dart down. Half buried in the filth and grease is a small, metallic object. It's a tiny charm, no bigger than your thumbnail, of a two-headed aquila, the symbol of the glorious Imperium, of the god Emperor himself. It's tarnished, one wing slightly bent, likely snapped off a decorated officer's uniform or a ceremonial weapon. It is worthless. Trash overlooked by the cleaning servitors, meaningless in this place of absolute despair. A thought, insane and defiant, sparks in your mind in a single, fluid motion, born of hive-ganger. Instinct you thought you'd forgotten, you stoop slightly, your hand darting down to palm the object. The cold metal is a shock against your skin. Your heart hammers against your ribs. If a guard sees, you'll be beaten senseless, if not executed on the spot for possessing potential contraband. But no one notices. Their attention is on the next wretch in line. With trembling fingers, you manage to slip the tiny charm into a loose seam inside your new jumpsuit. Near your wrist, you are shoved forward into a dark, stinking barracks, the door slamming shut behind you. You are now 734 Tango Kilo 9. You are collared, branded, and stripped of everything you are. But as you find a corner in the darkness and slide down the wall, your fingers secretly touch the rough outline of the hidden aquila. It is a lie, a piece of discarded scrap. Yet, in this moment, it feels like a covenant, a secret promise. It is not the symbol of Sheffer's cruel, calculating Imperium. It is the symbol of the divine emperor you were taught to revere, a sign that perhaps, beyond the pain and the sacrifice, true absolution might still be found. It is a sliver of full, say hope, but it's the only thing you own. The darkness of the barracks is not a peaceful one. It is a living entity, filled with the sounds of despair, the quiet, desperate sobbing of a disgraced officer, the low, guttural curses of the tattooed ganger, the rhythmic, terrified breathing of the shivering youth. You press yourself into the corner, the cold metal a stark reality against. You're back for a few moments. There is a strange sense of equilibrium in your shared misery. You are all numbers now, all collared, all condemned. You are, in this single, fleeting moment, LS in your damnation, but the illusion is shattered. when a heavy metal door at the far end of the chamber screeches open, spilling a rectangle of harsh, yellow light into the gloom. Framed in the doorway are not guards, but other convicts. They wear the same ragged uniform as you, but theirs is stained with the grime of hard labor and, you suspect, old blood. They carry themselves differently. Where you and the other new rivals are, hunched with shock and fear, these men, these veterans stand with a predatory stillness. They are leaner, harder, their eyes devoid of any, being but a cold, assessing emptiness. They are the ones who have survived this place for more than a few hours. They are the welcome wagon. Their leader is a mountain of flesh and scar tissue, a former forcer from a feral world, whose knuckles are calloused, lumps of broken bone. A crude, faded tattoo of a fanged skull covers one side of his face. He doesn't speak. He simply cracks his neck and pees into the room, his cronies fanning out behind him. They move through the ranks of the newcomers with the proprietary air of farmers inspecting livestock. This is their pen, and you are the new Arriva. LS, the shakedown begins without a word. The big man grabs the weeping officer by the front of his jumpsuit and lifts him effortlessly into the air. Anything pretty for old Groll. He rumbles, his voice like grinding rocks, running their hands over the rough-spun fabric, searching for anything that might have been missed by the guards. His small data slate is found on a scribe and is smashed against the wall. A man who protests too loudly is held down while another stomps on his hand, breaking his fingers with a sickening crunch. The guards do not come. No alarms sound. You understand with chilling clarity. This is part of the system. This is the forge, meant to burn away the weakest dross before you are even handed a weapon. Your heartbeat pounds against your ribs as Groll's gaze falls on you. He approaches, his sheer bulk blocking out the dim light. He smells of stale sweat, recycled nutrients, and something metallic you recognize as dry, deep blood. He stops a foot away, looking you up and down. His eyes are not just cruel, they're intelligent. He is assessing you, weighing your potential for resistance against the satisfaction of break. In you, you got that look, he says, his voice low. Like you think you're better than this place. This is the test. Every instinct screams at you to look away, to show submissio, and to make yourself small and unthreatening. But you have seen what happens to the submissive. Instead, you hold his gaze. You don't challenge him, but you don't break. You let your face remain a blank mask of weary resignation, the face of a man who has already lost everything that matters. Your body is tense, coiled, ready for the violence you know is coming. But your expression offers him nothing. Your hand instinctively moves to cover the tiny lump in your sleeve where the aquila is hidden. It is a foolish, sentimental gesture, but it anchors you. Groll sees the subtle shift in your posture, the lack of outright fear. In your eyes, he sees someone who will not be an easy victim, someone who might fight back, and fighting back, even in a losing effort, cause ease noise and injury. It is inefficient. For a long, tense moment, the only sound is the ragged breathing of the men around you. Groll's lip curls into a sneer. Waste of skin, he mutters. He gives you a shove that sends you staggering back against the metal wall, the impact rattling your teeth. But it is a dismissal, not an attack. He has made his decision. You are not worth the effort. He turns and moves on to his next target, the shivering youth, who immediately begins to beg. You have survived. You watch the rest of the grim ritual play out. You see the weak brutalized, the defiant broken, and the clever. Like you, left alone, a savage and unspoken hierarchy has been established. Groll and his cronies are at the top. the whimpering. Broken souls are at the bottom, destined to be prey. And you are somewhere in the middle, in the gray space of the invisible, the survivors. You realize that the Legion is not a brotherhood, not even a dysfunctional one. It is a food chain. Your only allies are your own wits and your capacity for violence. To trust anyone is to hand them a knife to press against your back. As the veterans retreat, leaving the wounded moaning in the darkness, the main lumens in the ceiling flicker and die, plunging the barracks into the blackness of a designated sleep cycle. You are left there with the pain in your back, the colon Y, our neck, and the cold, hard lesson that the enemies within these walls are just as deadly as any you will face on the battlefield. The days that follow in the barracks bleed into a grim, monotonous cycle of hard labor, tasteless nutrient paste, and the constant, simmering threat of violence. You learn to sleep with one eye open, to make yourself unnoticeable, to exist in the gray spaces. Your secret Aquila becomes a focal point, a tiny, solid thing in a world of pain and uncertainty. You trace its outline through your sleeve during the long, dark sleep cycles, a ritual that provides a fragile sense of sanity. Then, one cycle, the routine is shattered. Blaring klaxons and harsh, strobing lights jolt you from a fitful sleep. Guards storm the barracks, their voices amplified and distorted by vox speakers. Deployment. On your feet, scum. Move, move, move. There is no time to think. You are swept up in a chaotic torrent of bodies being driven through fortress corridors. The destination is the armory, but it is unlike any you could have imagined. There are no neat racks of weapons, no diligent tech priests anointing machine spirits. It is a vast, echoing chamber where gear is thrown into open bins. Like refuse, you are shoved towards a pile of laskins and told to grab one. The one you pick up is an ancient, battered Mars pattern relic. Its stock scarred with notches, and its power pack indicator flickering erratically. A grizzled veteran next to you laughs, a harsh, barking sound. Don't worry if the light's red. Green skin, he rasps, using a common slur for a new recruits. You'll be dead before you need a second clip. You are issued flak armor that is heavy, ill-fitting, and covered in dents. You can see a poorly patched hole over the chest plate and try not to think about the fate of its previous owner. You are given to fragmentation grenades, their activation runes worn smooth with age, and a bayonet that has been sharpened so many times it is little more than a spike. This is the panoply of the expendable. You are not being equipped for a victory. You are being equipped to die in a way that might marginally inconvenience the enemy. From the armory, you are herded into the cavernous belly of a bulk transport lander. The seals grind shut, encasing you in a vibrating metal tomb. The air mediatel grows thick with the smell of promethium fumes and terra sweat. The roar of the engines is a physical force pressing in on you, making your teeth ache. The lander lurches into the sky. Soon, the violent shuddering tells you that you are taking enemy fire. Red emergency lumens flicker, casting demonic shadows across the faces of the condemned. The veteran who spoke in the armory sits only, his eyes closed as if in meditation. The newcomers, like you, are a picture of barely controlled panic. Knuckles white where they grip their weapons, jaws clenched so tight they. Then, with a bone-jarring crash, the lander hits the ground. Before the final jolt has even registered, the assault ramp slams down, and your world dissolves into pure, undiluted hell. The sound hits you first, a physical wall of noise, a constant, deafening roar of explosions, the shriek of artillery, the high-pitched crackle of energy weapons, and 1,000 different screams. Then the sight. A battlefield ripped from a nightmare. The sky is a vortex of black and orange smoke. The ground is a churn. Bloody morass of mud and twisted metal. Shattered ruins burn against horizon. The air itself tastes of ash and cooked meat. A commissar, his face a grim mask of duty, stands beside the ramp. For the Emperor, he screams, but his words are almost lost in the D. In advance, you don't choose to run. Your body is carried forward by the wave of prisoners surging out of the lander. A desperate stampede away from the certainty of being a stationary target. You hit the mud and scramble forward, your ill-fitting armor shaving, your useless lascan held in a death grip. The man who ran out beside you vanishes in a flash of crimson mist as a shell lands where H. He was a second ago. A woman falls to your left, clutching a leg that is no longer there, her scream swallowed by the next explosion. This is not a battle. It is a slaughter. There is no stop. G, no cover, no objective beyond running forward into the meat grinder. You see them, then the enemy. Ragged cultists, their bodies marked with blasphemous symbols, firing autoguns from a hastily dug trench line. You raise your lascan, the training from some forgotten past life taking over. You aim at a fleeting shape and pull the trigger. The weapon kicks against your shoulder. A brief flash of awe, headlight glancing into the smoky chaos. You have no idea if you hit anything. You don't have time to check. You are running, firing. Your mind a blank slate of pure survival instinct. The grand ideals of the Imperium. Your forgotten crime. Schaeffer's false promises. Your secret aquila, all of it is burned away by the raw, primal terror of this moment. You dive behind the crater, eat shell of a wrecked chimera transport. Your lungs burning, your ears ringing. The first wave of the assault has broken. For a moment, there is a lull in the firing. You risk a look back at W. Here you came from. The ground you just covered is a carpet of bodies. You see the grizzled veteran, his chest blown wide open. You see Grohl, the barracks bully, impaled on a shard of twisted metal. Lander you arrived in is now a burning wreck. Of the 50 legionnaires who charged out, you can see maybe 10 who are still moving. 10. This was your baptism of fire. You have been initiated into the Legion single. Absolute truth. Your life is worth less than the dirt you are now pressed against, and as a fresh whistle blows, signaling the start of the next suicidal charge, you realize your atonement is not a journey, it is a statistic. The whistle's shrill command cuts through the ringing in your ears, an imperative that your body refuses to obey. Every muscle is locked, your limbs frozen by a terror so profound. It feels like paralysis. To stand is to die. To run forward into that maelstrom of lost fire and shrapnel is to commit suicide. Your mind warped you. Why the instinct for self-preservation screams at you to stay down, to burrow into the bloody mud and wait for the noise to stop. You are not alone in this paralysis. A few meters away, another legionnaire, a woman with a fresh brand on her cheek, is pressed against the dirt, shaking her head, muttering no, 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 over and over again. Her defiance is not born of rebel, lion, but of a mind that has simply shattered under the sheer horror of it all. That is when you see him, moving calmly through the carnage, seemingly untouched by the chaos, is a commissar. His long, black greatcoat billows round him, and the impossibly polished brim of his peaked cap is the sharpest, cleanest line in this entire hellscape. He is the personification of imperial order in a world of absolute chaos. He is Schaeffer's Wunade, manifest. He does not shout or rally the troops. He simply walks the line of survivors, his eyes scanning for any cog in the machine that has ceased to function. His gaze falls upon the shaken woman, He stops beside her, his tall frame casting a long shadow over her prone form. He does not offer a hand. He does not offer words of encouragement. He simply looks down at her for a moment, his face an unreadable mask of grim duty. "The Emperor requires your service, soldier," he states, his voice calm and cold, yet carrying with absolute clarity over the din of battle. The woman just sobs in response, curling into a tighter ball. The commissar's sighs, a small, impatient sound. He unholsters the bold pistol it is. The weapon is enormous, a brutalist statement of power and authority. Hesitation is heresy. He says, not to her, but to the universe at large. He points the barrel at the backhoe. If ahead, you want to scream, to look away, but you are as frozen as she is. The bold pistol fires with a deafening, percussive cracked boom that is utterly distinct from the surrounding sounds of war. The woman's head doesn't just break, it detonates. A cloud of red mist and bone fragments erupts, and her body is slammed into the mud, twitching once before falling still. The commissar does not flinch. He is merely a functionary, purging a defective pot. His gaze then sweeps across the remaining survivors, you included. His eyes are pits of black ice. In them, you see no anger, no sadistic pleasure. You see only the same cold, pragmatic emptiness you saw in Colonel Sheffer's eyes. It is the gaze of a man looking at a tool, assessing its utility, and you understand. In that moment, the fundamental equation of the Penal Legion. The enemy in front of you might kill you. A stray shell, a lucky shot, a bayonet in the dark. Their lethality is a matter of chance and circumstance. But the commissar behind you will kill you. His lethality is a certainty. He is the fail-safe. He is the embodiment of Sheffer's unblinking gaze, a promise that your death is guaranteed. One way or another, the only choice you have is who delivers it, and who. More potent fear floods your system, overriding the instinct to cower. The abstract terror of enemy fire is replaced by the immediate, personal certainty of the bold pistol. 10 meters away, that fear is a fire in your veins. It gets you to your feet. Round you, the other survivors, having witnessed the same brutal lesson, also begin to stand. Their movements stiffer, jerky, like puppets being pulled by strings of terror. The commissar gives a single, sharp nod of approval. The system is working as designed. You join the second charge, your legs pumping, mechanically. A roar, wordless scream tearing from your throat. This is not a cry of fury or faith. It is the sound of an animal running from a predator. You fire your Alaskan wildly, not even aiming, simply pointing it forward as you run. The battlefield is still a nightmare. The air still thick with death. But your perspective has fundamentally shifted. You are no longer just a soldier fighting an enemy. You are a prisoner trapped between two executioners. Colonel Sheffer has crafted the perfect trap. A war where the greatest threat is not the opposing army, but your own command. As you leap over the body of a fallen comrade and dive headfirst into the enemy trench, the chaos of bayonets and guttural screams erupting round you have never felt more terrified, or more hopelessly, brutally alive. The trench is yours. The thought is almost laughable. You own a 10-meter stretch of muddy, blood-soaked ditch littered with the corpses of its previous defenders and the legionnaires who died taking it. The air is a thick, acrid soup of ozone from lost fire. The coppery tang of blood. The tench-avoided bowels for a few precious moments. The storm of battle has moved further down the line, leaving you in a pocket of relative silence, punctuated only by the crackle of burning debris and the moans of the dying. Your first instinct is to check yourself for holes. You run your hands over your torso and limbs, the frantic, desperate search for wetness or pain. You find nothing but bruises and a shallow cut on your arm. You are alive, functional. A statistical error. Your next instinct, the one that has been brutally hammered into you, is to check your gear. This is the cruelest. Urge of the Penal Legionnaire, a ritual more vital than any prayer. Your life depends not on the Emperor's grace, but on the shoddy, mass-produced tools of war you have been given. You look at your laskin. The barrel housing is glowing a dull, angry red, a sure sign of imminent overheating. The power pack, which was supposedly fully charged before the drop, is flashing a low power room. You have fired perhaps 20 shots. The weapon is a piece of junk, a product of some third-rate forged world that values quotas over quality. It's a miracle it hasn't XPL oded in your hands already. You look round. The handful of other survivors are engaged in the same ritual. But it is more than a simple equipment check. It is a harvest, with a grim, practiced efficiency that speaks of long and bitter experience. The veterans move among the dead. They are not paying their respects. They are shopping. A legionnaire with a shattered arm calmly uses his good hand to strip the boots off a nearby corpse, comparing them to his own worn-out ones. Another cracks open the chest plate of a fallen cultist, not out of malice, but to retrieve the ammunition and clips for his scavenged autogun. This is the unspoken rule of the 13th Legion. The dead are just supply caches. To hesitate is to die with a jammed rifle in your hands, a cold, pragmatic voice in your head, a voice that sounds disturbingly like survival, tells you to do the same. You feel a wave of revulsion, a final, dying protest from the person you used to be. But the revulsion is drowned out by the image of the commissar's bold pistol. You crawl towards the body of a legionnaire you saw fall just as you entered the trench. You don't know his name, only his number, now render illegible by the massive exit wound in his back. You avert your eyes from his face and get to work. His laskin is smashed beyond repair, but his power packs are intact. You take them along W with his canteen, giving it a shake to confirm it's still full. His flak helmet has a clean hole through the front, but his grenades are still hooked to his webbing. You take those too, each item used. Avenge feels like a separate, distinct sin, a profanity against the memory of a fallen comrade. But sin is what brought you here in the first place. What's one more stain on a soul? Already condemned. As you work, your fingers brush against the cold and yielding metal of the collar on your neck. You are suddenly paralyzed by a new and specific horror. You have been so focused on the inadequate uses of your weapon and armor, you forgot the most critical piece of your equipment. The collar is a tool of control. Yes, but it is also a piece of technology. And, like everything else you have been given, it was made by the lowest bidder. What is its failure rate? What if a stray radio signal, a surge from a nearby plasma blast, or just a faulty capacitor causes it to detonate? The thought is paralyzing. The very device meant to ensure your obedience could malfunction and execute you by pure chance. You look down at the collection of items you have scavenged. A faulty rifle powered by a dead man's energy cells. Dented armor that has already failed its previous owner once. Grenades that might or might not detonate when you need them to. And a bomb around you. A neck that might go off if you stumble too hard. These are not the tools of a soldier of the Imperium. They're the tools of the damned. A collection of refuse and liabilities that perfectly encapsulates your worth in the grand calculus of war. You are not meant to be effective. You are meant to be an obstacle. You are human razor wire, a biological minefield. The purpose of your gear isn't to ensure your survival. It's to grant you just Enough function to die in a slightly more advantageous position. The NCOs are screaming now. Their voices hoarse. Reform the line. On your feet. Move. You push yourself up. The scavenged gear. Heavy. A constant, physical reminder of the dead who have passed it on to you. There is no rest in the captured trench. No time to bind wounds. DS or process the horror of what you've just survived, before the last pockets of enemy resistance have even been silenced. The NCOs are moving among you. Their voices roar and grating. Get ahead, Co. And redistribute ammo. On your feet. You worthless dogs. The man giving the orders is a sergeant named Kell. A hulking legionnaire whose face is a roadmap of scar tissue. He is an Imperial Guard officer. Professionally trained and detached. He is a convict like you. One who has simply managed to survive long enough to be put in charge of other convicts. This, you realize, is what promotion looks like in the 13th Legion. You are what is left of your platoon, perhaps 30 souls out of the 200 who were loaded onto the transport lander. Kell doesn't bow with a rousing speech or complex strategy. He simply points a scarred, trembling finger towards a ridge 200 meters away. Atop it sits a single, squat ferrocrete pillbox. Even from the distance, you can see the dark slits of its weapon emplacements and the long, wicked barrel of a heavy bolter. It is a concrete fist of defiance, and it has been pinning down the entire Imperial advance in this sector for 3 days. Here's the plan. Kell growls, spitting a glob of bloody phlegm onto the trench floor. Command wants that guns shut up. Artillery is busy, and the flyboys can't get close. So we're gonna shut it up. He looks round at the exhausted, terrified faces. We charge it. We keep charging it till it stops shooting. A newcomer, barely more though, and a boy, his face pale with shock, dares to ask a question. What's our objective? Sergeant, are we to take the bunker? Kell turns his head slowly to look at the boy. A cruel, humorless smile plays on his lips. Objective. Your objective, lad, is to draw its fire. You run at it. You make a lot of noise, and you die. That's your objective. The brutal honesty of the statement hangs in the air, more chilling than any commissar's threat. You look at the faces of the veterans. There is no shock, no outrage, just a weary, hollow-eyed resignation. A man with a deep-set scowl on his face simply begins checking the charge on his power. Hack. Another tightens the strap on his helmet. They have heard these orders before. This is not a desperate, last-ditch plan. This is just tea. He plan. This is what you are for. You understand the cold, inhuman calculus of it now. You are not an assault force. You are a human smokescreen. Your lives will be spent to buy a few precious menus for a real military unit, a proper guard regiment, with proper heavy weapons to maneuver into a flanking position while the pillbox gunners are busy mowing you down. Your mission is not to achieve victory. Your mission is to be the cost of victory. The order comes as simple. Raw scream from Sergeant Kell. Go. And for the second time in what feels like a lifetime but has only been an hour. You are running towards a fortified enemy position. But this charge is different. The first was a chaotic, panicked flight. This one is cool. You know exactly what your purpose is. You are not trying to reach the bunker. You are trying to stay alive for as long as possible while running towards it. It is a horrifyingly paradoxical state of mind. You zigzag. You dive from crater to crater. You use the bodies of the fallen as momentary cover. Every second you survive is another second the heavy bolter is firing at you and not at the unseen forces maneuvering in the distance. The heavy ball opens up, a monstrous, thudding roar that seems to shake the very air. Each round is a miniature explosion, and where they hit, men simply cease to exist. A legionnaire running beside you is seen, caught in a burst, and he is transformed into a cloud of red vapor and bone fragments. You don't even have time to register his face. You just keep running. You see the glint of Lascanon lenses from a different ridge, far to your right. You hear the distinctive crack thump of their discharge. The real soldiers are in position. Your sacrifice is working. You dive behind a slab of shattered rock readers. A storm of explosive shells churns the ground where you were a moment ago, pinned down. You can do nothing but press yourself into the dirt and pray to an emperor who has clearly first taken you. The noise is unimaginable, the physical pressure that threatens to crush you. The pillbox is still firing, but now its attention is divided. You see a flash on the distant ridge. Heartbeat later, a brilliant glance of energy strikes the ferrocrete bunker. It doesn't destroy it, but a large chunk of the wall explodes outward. The heavy boulder falls silent. Your mission, your purpose, is fulfilled as the surviving legionnaires, a pitiful few, begin to crawl back towards the relative safety of the trench. You are not filled with relief or triumph. There is only a vast, hollow emptiness. You have performed your function. You have been a good tool, and tomorrow there will be another ridge, another bunker, and another routine suicide mission waiting for you. You map it back. You and a dozen others crawling through the mud and gore, returning to the trench that now feels less like a fortification and more like a mass grave you are temporarily inhabiting. Silence that follows the assault is profound. It is the silence of shock, of exhaustion, of too many souls departed into shorter time. You slump against the trench wall. Your body a sea, ankle, agonizing ache. Your mind a hollowed-out cavern. You killed, you survived, and in return, you have gained another few meters of cursed earth. The mouth of your existence is relentlessly grim. Your throat is a desert, raw from screaming and caked with dust. You unscrew the cap of your scavenged canteen, tilt it back, and get only a few lukewarm drops, enough to wet your tongue, but no tea to quench the deep, burning thirst. As you lower the canteen with a sigh of weary frustration, the man next to you stirs. He's one of the veterans, a quiet, grim-faced man with a network of burn scars covering one side of his face. You haven't exchanged a single word with him, but you recognize him from the charge. He moves with a quiet efficiency that marks him as a long-term survivor. Without looking at you, he nudges his own canteen against your leg. You look down, then back at him. He just stares forward at the opposite trench wall, his expression unreadable. This is a testo, of a different kind. In the brutal economy of the Legion, a mouthful of water can be the difference between life and death. To offer it is an act of insanity. To accept it is to incur it. You may never be able to repay, but your thirst is a physical pain, overriding caution. You take the canteen. It's heavier than yours, maybe a quarter full. You take a single, short swallow, enough to ease the fire in your throat, but not enough to be greedy. You screw the cap back on and hand it back. The man takes it, gives a single, almost imperceptible nod, and clips it back to his belt. Tea, that is all. But in that silent, simple transaction, something fundamental shifts. It is not friendship. It is not kindness. It is a flicker of something far more raw and pragmatic. Mutual recognition. He has acknowledged you as a fellow survivor, as someone who passed the trial and is still standing. By accepting and returning the canteen without trying to take more, you have acknowledged the same in him. It is the first truly human connection you have made since your condemnation, an unspoken pact in the heart of hell. You start to notice it elsewhere. Tiny, fleeting moments. Cooperation, a legionnaire helps another clear, jam in their laskin. Their hands moving with practiced synergy. You see a hulking trooper. A man who looks like he could snap you in two. Quietly tear a strip from his own uniform to help a wounded squad mate bind a bleeding leg. These are not acts of altruism. They are acts of mutual investment. The legionnaire with the working rifle is more likely to cover your advance. The one who can still walk is less likely to slow you down. It is a grim, survivalist form of camaraderie, a web of fragile, unspoken alliances forged in the crucible. This fragile humanity, however, is a disease in the eyes of your masters. It is a flaw in the system. Colonel Sheffer's machine runs on expendability, and expendability requires isolation. Men who fight for each other might hesitate to charge into certain death. They might question an order that needlessly sacrifices a comrade. They might start to believe they are more than just numbers, and so the system corrects itself. Sergeant Kill stomps down the trench line, his face a mask of fury. You filth think this is a social club. He roars, his voice cracking with rage. He grabs two legionnaires who are sharing a nutrient bar and slams their heads together with a sickening crunch. There is no squad. There is no brother. There is only the Emperor's will and your death. He proceeds to reassign everyone. You are pulled from your position and shoved into a different section of the trench, far from the scarred veteran whose name you still don't know. The nascent fire teams are shattered, the fragile bonds deliberately and brutally broken. The message is clear. Your only relationship is with your duty. Anything else is a weakness that will be purged. You take your new position, a stranger among strangers once more. The brief, fleeting warmth of connection is gone, replaced by the familiar cold of isolation. Sheffer's unblinking gaze, acting through his BR. Udal NCO has reasserted control. But as you settle into the mud, you happen to catch the eye of the scarred veteran. 50 meters down the line, he gives you that same, barely perceptible nod. The pact has not been broken. It has just been forced into the shadows, and you realize this fragile, forbidden trust is now the most dangerous thing you possess. It is a secret rebellion of the soul. It won't keep you safe from enemy fire, but it is a silent, shared defiance against the machine designed to grind you into dust. And for that, it will get you killed by your own side. Twice as fast. How long has it been? You try to count the days, but the concept has lost all meaning. Time is no longer measured in the familiar cycles of light and dark. On this world, the bruised, smoke-choked sky is a constant, unchanging twilight. You measure your existence in different terms now. 3 major offenses, 7 trench relocations, 48 comrades whose designation you knew, gone. The war is a great, grinding engine, and you are simply living in the brief, terrifying spaces between the movements of its gears, the constant stress, the lack of proper sleep. The ever-present threat of a violent, meaningless death have begun to take their toll. Not on your body, which is a collection of scars and aches you've learned to ignore, but on your mind. The cracks are beginning to show. At first, they are small. You hear things the faint, phantom scream of a dying man on the wind. Long after the battle has subsided, you catch fleeting movements in the corner of your eye that vanish when you turn to look. But the decay is accelerating. Sometimes, when you stare into the flickering light of a burning Promethean barrel, you see faces. The flames, the face of the shivering youth from your first day, the face of the woman the commissar executed, her eyes wide with a silent, eternal accusation. They are gone in an instant, but their image is seared into the back of your mind. You find yourself disassociating, your consciousness floating away from your body. You watch from a distance as a numbered convict, 734 Tango Kilo 9, pay, performs his duties with mechanical efficiency. You watch him clean his lasket. Watch him eat the gray, tasteless nutrient paste. Watch him press himself into the mud as artillery shells rain down. You observe his fear, his exhaustion, and his animal cunning as if he were a stranger. It is a mercy, this detachment. It is the only way your mind can endure the unendurable. But, you know, with a cold, creeping dread, that each time you float away, it becomes harder to come back. You are losing your grip on yourself. In these moments of encroaching madness, you have only one ancho, hidden in the seam of your sleeve. The tiny, bent aquila charm has become the most important object in the universe. Its physical reality is a counterpoint to the phantoms in your mind. During long, terrifying hours of sentry duty, staring into a no-man's land that rides with shadows, you secretly press your thumb against its sharp, metallic edges. The faint sensation is a jolt back to reality. It is a reminder. Before you were a number, you were a person. Before this hell, there was a life. The charm is a tangible piece of that lost world, a focal point for the dissolving fragments of your identity. It is a lie, a piece of trash you found in the dirt. But it is the only thing keeping you from completely unraveling. This desperate ritual, grounding yourself, grants you a horrifying clarity. You start to see the same decay in the other long-term survivors. You see it in Vol, the scarred veteran, who has started to have quiet, one-sided conversations with the spirits of his fallen comrades. You see it in a woman who now meticulously ranges spent Laskin cartridges into strange, spiral patterns after every firefight. A desperate attempt to impose order on a universe of pure chaos. You see it in the 1,000-yard stares of men whose minds have already left their bodies, leaving behind nothing but twitching, functional shell. LS, you realize then that Sheffer's system is even more insidious than you imagine. The Imperium is not just spending your life, it is consuming your sanity. It is rendering you down, piece by piece, until nothing of the original person remains. Death on the battlefield is not the only way out of the 13th Legion. There is another exit, the complete and total erosion of the self, to become a ghost in a living body, an automaton that eats, sleeps, and kills on command until its biological components finally fail. As you sit in the trench, the phantom screams, whispering at the edge of your hearing. You clutch your hidden aquila with a desperate, frantic energy. It is no longer just a symbol of false hope for a redemption after death. It is your only shield against the slow, creeping death of your soul while you are still cursed to live. After the horror of the pillbox, your platoon is pulled back from the front line. It is not a reward. It is a practical measure. There are too few of you left to function as an effective wave of cannon fodder. You are merged with the remnants of two other decimated platoons, and for a few cycles, you are put on fortificate and duty, digging trenches, hauling ammunition, and burying the endless dead. The respite from active combat does nothing to ease the strain on your mind. If anything, it's worse. The quiet moments are when the faces in the smoke return, when the phantom screams are at their loudest. Then a new set of orders arrives, and it is unlike any you have received before. Sergeant Kelji others the survivors, his scarred face uncharacteristically serious. Listen up, you dogs, he grunts. We've got a priority alpha mission, straight from the colonel's desk. A colleague. Tiff groan ripples through the assembled legionnaires. Orders from Sheffer are never good. This ain't a frontal assault. Kell continues, and a murmur of surprise follows. Intel says, so read us. Transport went down a few clicks behind enemy lines. It was carrying a sacred relic, the icon of Saint Sabat. Our mission is to push through the sector, secure the icon, and bring it back. Strange and familiar feelings spread through the ranks. A flicker of hope. This is different. The objective isn't to draw fire or test defenses. It is a recovery mission, a holy mission to solve. The sacred object of the Imperial Creed, surely a task. Like that carries the Emperor's favor. Surely. A man is not sent on such a mission merely to die. For the first time, you see something other than weary cynicism in the eyes of the veterans. You see a glint of purpose. Perhaps this is the one good deed, the one worthy act that could lead to true absolution. Your hand instinctively finds the hidden aquila in your sleeve. It feels almost warm. The plan even sounds achievable. The enemy in the designated sector are believed to be a scattered and disorganized cultist warp. Their main strength drawn away to fight a larger battle to the east. The crash site is in a ruined manufactory, providing ample cover for an advance. Sheffer himself, in the mission brief, stated that this was a chance for the most faithful and resilient among you to prove your worth. It feels like a genuine opportunity, a test of faith you might actually be able to pass. The assault begins, and the Legionnaires fight with a renewed, desperate vigor. They are no longer just convicts fighting to avoid a bolt to the head. They are men and women fighting for a cause that, while I can almost believe in, you fight alongside Vol, the scarred veteran, moving with an unspoken synergy, covering each other's advance, a seamless two-man engine of destruction. You feel a surge of adrenaline that tastes not of fear, but of pride. You are not just an expendable asset. You are a soldier of the Imperium, on a holy quest. The cultists are indeed scattered, and you cut through the disorganized resistance with brutal efficiency. After an hour of intense but successful fighting, you reach the crash site, a crater of twisted metal and burning wreckage in the heart of the ruins, and there, impossibly, standing upright on a small pedestal of rockrit amidst the devastation, is the icon. It is a golden, jewel-encrusted effigy of the saint, and it seems to glow with its own internal luminescence, casting a holy light on the awestruck faces of your squad. It is pristine, untouched by the crash or the battle. For a moment, all is silent, but for the crackle of flames, you have done it. It is real. A designated legionnaire, a man known for his quiet piety, steps forward and reverently lifts the relic from its perch. As his fingers touch the G, a burst of static screeches from every vox. Unit. It is not Sergeant Kell. It is the calm, precise, and utterly cold voice of Colonel Sheffer, broadcast across all channels. Beacon is active. Target confirmed. Before you can even process the words, the sky erupts. Artillery shells, fired from Imperial positions, begin to rain down directly on the crash site. Hidden las cannons open up. From the surrounding ruins, their beams of coherent light slicing through legionnaires who are still staring at the icon in bewildered awe. The trap has been sprung. The truth crashes down upon you with the force of a thunderhammer. There was no holy mission. The icon was a lie. A homing beacon dressed in gold leaf. The disorganized cultists. Your achievable objective. It was all a setup. Sheffer knew this sector was a nest of heresy, but he needed to pinpoint its nexus, its unholy heart. He sent you in, dangling the ultimate prize of redemption before you, using your desperate hope as his hunting dog. You were a tool to find the enemy's holiest site. And now that you have served your purpose, you are being purged along with them, a convenient end way to eliminate both the heretics and the contaminated assets who engage them. The glimmer of hope was the cruelest joke of all. As you dive behind a piece of wreckage, the world XPL, oding round you in a storm of friendly fire, you finally understand the fall. monstrous depth of your colonel's devotion. He would sacrifice anything and anyone for victory. The universe is there. Iron Thunder, you press yourself into the filth. As the ground heaves, the air ripped apart by the scream of incoming shells fired by your own side. This is the ultimate betrayal, the final, cruel punchline to Sheffer's joke. When the Breich finally lifts, the silence it leaves behind is heavier and more terrible than any explosion. You cautiously raise your head. The clearing is gone, replaced by a smoking, blackened crater. The bodies of the legionnaires who had rushed to the icon are now just indistinguishable. Carbonized shapes fused with the scorched earth, the holy ray. Lick itself is a melted, twisted lump of slag. Its divine promise revealed as a cheap facade dot by some miracle. You survived. You were far enough from the blast's epicenter that the wreckage of the Sororita's ship absorbed most of the shrapnel. You are not alone. Slowly, other figures begin to rise from the debris. You see Vorl, the scarred veteran, his face streaked with soot, uffers, each wound bleeding freely on his forehead. You see maybe 5, 6 others, the survivors, the ones who were too cynical, too slow, or simply too lucky to be standing at ground zero. There are no cheers of survival. You simply look at each other, and in every pair of eyes, you see the same thing. The death of hope, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard rage. Before you can even take a full breath, your Vox unit crackles to life. It is not Sheffer's voice. This one is different, clear, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. It is the voice of a professional, fighter from a proper Imperial Guard regiment. Survivors at beacon location. You are now designated Remnant 7, the voice says, as if reading from a logistical report. Your previous mission permit. Ours are concluded. Acknowledged. Vorl spits a glob of blood onto the ground, his knuckles white where he grips his lascar, but says nothing. The Vox crackles again. Remnant 7, you have new orders. The officer explains the situation with bloodless efficiency. A column of Lehman Russ battle tanks from the Cadian 88th is preparing to advance through a narrow ravine to exploit the disruption hour. Mission caused, however, the ravine is suspected to be heavily seeded with anti-tank mines. Standard minesweeping servitors are unavailable. Your task, the officer continues, his tone unsure, in-gang, is to confirm the route is clear for the armored. Advance. You will proceed on foot, down the center of the ravine, and signal upon reaching the far side. He doesn't have to say it. He doesn't have to use the words, but everyone in Remnant 7 understands the order perfectly. You are the minesweepers. Your bodies are the detectors. It is a simple, brutal calculation of asset value, the life of a battle tank, and its highly trained crew is worth more than the lives of a handful of condemned criminals. This is not a malicious, personal trap like Sheffer's. This is something worse. The S is the cold, impersonal, and utterly logical doctrine of the Imperial war machine in action. You are an expendable asset being expended in the most efficient way possible to protect a valuable arm. There is no refusing. To do so means immediate execution from the Commissar, who is undoubtedly watching from a hidden position, led by a grim-faced fool. You and the other half-dozen civilians begin the slow walk into the mouth of the ravine. The silence is absolute. The high rock walls block out the sounds of the distant battle, creating an eerie, tomb-like atmosphere. Every step is a gamble. Every loose rock, every patch of soft earth sends a jolt of ice-cooled adrenaline through your veins. You are no longer walking. You are simply placing one foot in front of the other arm, waiting for oblivion. It doesn't take long. The Legionnaire walking 10 meters ahead of you, a woman whose name you never learn, takes a step and is simply gone. There is no scream, Jew, Saint a blinding flash and a deafening WHUMP that echoes off. The ravine walls, a rain of dirt, rock, and vaporized flesh patters down around you. For a moment, everyone freezes. Then the officer's voice ray turns over the vox, as calm and steady as before. Detonation confirmed at grid reference Theta 9. Mark the location, Rem 7. Continue your advance. The man's life has been reduced to a data point, a red icon on a tactical map. He is an acceptable loss. You force your legs to move, your whole body trembling. The path is clearer now. In a morbid sense, you now know who Ray 1 mine was. You continue the slow, agonizing march. The engines of the waiting Lehman Russ stanks a low, hungry rumble at your back. You are just a tool of logistics now, a disposable component and so. Ring the larger machine can continue its advance, one acceptable loss at a time. You survived the ravine, you and Vul, no one else. The two of you walked out of that dusty tomb, leaving the yard. Remains of Remnant 7 behind as data points on a map. You were given no commendation, no respite. You were simply assigned to a new platoon, filled with fresh-faced convicts recently shipped in to replenish the Legion's ever-dwindling numbers. You look into their eyes and you see the same fear and confusion you once felt. But you feel no kinship with them. The betrayal you witnessed, the friendly fire you endured, has carved a chasm between you and them. You are no longer just a convict. You are a witness, and in the 13th Penal Legion, witnesses are liabilities. The war has reached its apex. After months of brutal, attritional fighting, Imperial forces have pushed the enemy back to their final stronghold, the Citadel of the Apostate. It is a monstrous fortress of black stone and rusted iron, its walls bristling with 1,000 weapon emplacements. The final assault is being prepared, a massive, coordinated attack involving dozens of guard regiments, and for this glorious final act, the Penal Legion has been given the highest honor. Colonel Sheffer himself addresses the entire Legion, his voice broadcast across the staging grounds by hulking vox rays. He turns on the turret of a banner blade, his immaculate greatcoat a stark black slush against the gray, smoky sky. He speaks of duty, of sacrifice, and of the final, glorious payment of your debt. He points a gleaming bionic finger towards the Citadel. Our forces are poised for victory, he declares, his voice ringing with false conviction. But one obstacle remains, the adamantine gate. It is protected by a powerful void shield, impervious to our bombardment. To win this day, that shield must fall. He pauses, letting the dramatic weight of his words settle. A conventioner. An assault would be suicide. Therefore, I have chosen a different path. I have selected a single squad of our finest, most resilient legionnaires for an assignment of singular, historical importance, a forlorn hope. He lets the archaic, glorious term hang in the air. This squad will be entrusted with a unitask melter charge of immense power. They will advance on the gate under TH. In cover of our main assault. Their mission is not to survive. Their mission is to reach the gate. The detonation of the charge will overload the void shield for a mere handful of seconds. In that window, our Vindicator tanks will shatter the gate, and the day will be ours. It is the ultimate sacrifice, the purest act of faith, the swiftest, most certain path to atonement I can offer. Cold dread settles in the pit of your stomach. You know what's coming. Sheffer unrolls a data slate. The following legionnaires have been granted this final honor. He begins to read up to senior. Shuns, they are not random. They are the troublemakers, the survivors of failed missions, the ones who have seen too much. He reads the number of a man who led a food riot a month ago. He reads the number of a woman who spat at a commissar. Then he reads Vorl's designation, and then he reads yours, 734 Tango Kilo 9. The entire surviving contingent of Remnant 7 has been volunteered. This is not an honor. It is a meticulously planned execution. Shiver is cleaning his slate, purging the last living evidence of his cruelest betrayals and dressing it up as a heroic sacrifice. You are race separated from the others, you, Vorl, and 8 other condemned souls. You are given extra stims, the harsh chemicals flooding your system with a cold, artificial fire, a hulking legionnaire. I named Grohl, a man convicted of murdering his own officer, is chosen to carry the melter charge. A team of tech priests reverently bolts the massive hunting device to his back. It is a volatile, unstable instrument of immense power, and Grohl is now little more than its delivery system. You look at Vorl. His scarred face is a mask of stone, but his eyes meet yours, and in them, you see a final, shared understanding. This is the end. You take your position at the front of the Legion's formation. You can feel the thousands of eyes on your 10-person squad. You are a spectacle, a sacrifice to be sanctified. You can see Sheffer on his command vehicle, watching you through magnoculars. You can see the commissars lining the trenches, their bold pistols held. Be ready, not to execute you for a cowardice, but to salute your glorious departure. You clutch the hidden aquila in your sleeve one last time. It offers no comfort. It is a child's toy, a remnant of a foolish dream. The signal flare screams into the sky. The assault begins. The 10 of you in the Forlorn Hope squad begin to run. And as you do, every single gun on the fortress wall, as if guided by a single, hateful mind, swivels and opens fire on you. The ground round you erupts, and the air becomes a solid wall of fire and death. Your world narrows to the twin. Y meters of blasted earth directly in front of you. There is no thought, no fear, only the rhythmic pounding of your boots and the ragged, burning gasps of your own breath. The air is a solid thing. A wall of plasma bolts, heavy bolt rounds, and shrapnel that you must force your way through. To your left, a Legionnaire vanishes in a silent, blossoming flower of orange plasma. To your right, another is sithed in half by a hail of kinetic projectiles. You are running through a storm of absolute death, and survival is no longer a matter of skill or instinct, but of pure, impossible chance with every single step, against all odds. 3 of you make it through the kill zone. You, Vorl, and Grohl, the hulking convict carrying the melter charge on his back. You slam into the base of the adamantine gate, the sheer metal wall, providing a sliver of cover from the ceaseless barrage. The roar of weapon impacts against the shimmering void shield is a physical blow, a continuous, deafening thunder that vibrates through your bones. Grohl, his leg armor shredded and bleeding, slumps against the gate hand. With trembling, clumsy fingers, begins the arming sequence for the melter charge. A series of red runes illuminates on its casing, beginning a 60-second countdown. Then, something changes. The overwhelming volume of fire from the citadel walls slackens, the focus of T. Here enemy's rage seems to shift. A new sound cuts through the din of battle, a deep, resonant thrumming, like a colossal heartbeat. It is followed by a sound that does not belong in any human or animal throat. A wet, chittering chorus, the sound of a million clicking mandibles. Before the melted charge's countdown can reach its halfway point, the adamantine gate itself begins to move. It does not explode. It grinds open, with a shriek of tortured metal that scrapes at your sanity. The defenders are not cowering behind their walls. They are coming out to meet you. The thing that emerges from the darkness of the gate is not the cultists you have been fighting. It is a tide of living nightmare, a swarm of writhing, biomechanical abominations. Their flesh a blasphemous fusion of chitin, sinew, and rusted corrupted metal. They scuttle forward onto many legs, scythe-like claws clicking on the ferrocrete, their weapon limbs firing bolts of ickly green energy that cause the very ground to bubble and melt, and behind them, stooped low to fit through the gate, comes their master. It is a demon engine, a towering monstrosity of brass, and bone. Its former mockery of a mighty war machine, powered by the howling soul of a captured demon. It raises its colossal head, and the roar it unleashes is not just a sound. It is a psychic scream that lances directly into your mind, filling your consciousness with images of burning worlds and laughing, thirsty gods dot in that single, sanity-shattering moment, the entire war your entire existence is brutally recontextualized. The cruelty of Colonel Sheffer, the cold pragmatism of the commissars, the savage hierarchy of the barracks sit is all rendered pathetic and significant. Sheffer is a monster, but he is a comprehensible human monster. His evil operates on a scale you can understand. This thing from the gate, this absolute horror, is a fundamental violation of reality itself. It is a force of cosmic entropy and pure malevolence that doesn't just want to defeat the Imperium. It wants to devour it, to dissolve it into a screaming chaos that Black over eternity. You look at Vol, his face pale and slack with a terror beyond anything the Imperial Guard could ever inspire, and you feel it. The sudden, shocking kinship. Before this ultimate enemy, you are all just human, frail, insignificant, and utterly doomed. Grohl, the bomb carrier, is dying. A dozen shrapnel wounds have turned his uniform into a bloody rag. But he sees the oncoming tide. He sees the demon engine. With the lust of his strength, he gives a bloody, defiant grin. The countdown on the melted charge shows 5 seconds. He looks at you, then at the monstrosity, and makes his final choice. He deactivates the timer, and with a primal roar, slams his fist down on the manual override. The Forlorn Hope's mission was to disable the shield, but Grohl's final act is not for Sheffer's plan. It is an act of pure, spiteful defiance against the greater darkness. The melted charge detonates. A brilliant white sphere of energy erupts. Grohl is vaporized instantly. You and Vol, shielded for a microsecond by Grohl's larger frame, are not incinerated but are picked up by the blast wave and thrown like dolls, slammed into tea. He rubble with bone-shattering force as the world dissolves into white-hot pain, and then, mercifully, darkness. You return to consciousness in increments of pure agony. Your world is a high-pitched whine in your ears, and the coppery taste of your own blood. Every inch of your body is a landscape of torment. Your left arm is a useless, mangled ruin, and your vision in one eye is a gray, crimson haze. You push yourself up with your one good arm, the movement sending a galaxy of fresh pain through your shattered ribs. The scene before you is one of biblical destruction. The melted blast stage has carved a glassy crater in the battlefield, filled with the molten remains of the first wave of demonic horrors. The great demon engine is damaged, roaring in frustration. Sheets of its core, upted armor glowing cherry red where the heat washed over it. The void shield is down, the breach is open, and through that breach, the main Imperial assault has begun. Lehman Ross tanks thunder past your position, their cannons roaring, waves of guardsmen, their uniforms clean and their discipline perfect, charged towards the Citadel's heart. Your sacrifice, Grohl's sacrifice, has worked. The tide of the battle has turned. You see Vol a few meters away, half buried in rubble. He is alive, but his legs are twisted at an unnatural angle. He is not getting up. He meets your gaze, a grim, bloody smile on his lips. This is it, the end of the line. You have seconds, maybe minutes. Before the demon engine recovers or the tide of battle simply rolls over you, it is then that you see him, a command chimera, flying the personal standard of the 13th Penal Legion, rolls to a stop near the edge of the breach and standing in the top hatch, observing the glorious victory he has engineered, is Colonel Schaefer. He's immaculate and touched by the filth and fury of the battle, watching the fruits of your suffering through a pair of magnoculars. He is a god, surveying his creation of carnage, and you, the broken tool that made it all possible, are less than nothing. Just another piece of rubble in his masterpiece. Your Laskin is a wasted piece of scrap metal, but your fingers, searching your webbing for anything, find one last thing, the fragmentation grenade, the one you scavenged from the dead legionnaire in the trench. Its casing still solid, its activation rune still sharp. You have one throw left, one final act. Your gaze shifts between two targets. The first is the demon engine. It is beginning to stir, its massive limbs testing their purchase. To throw your last grenade at it would be the proper, soldierly thing to do. It would be a futile gesture, a fly stinging a behemoth. But it would be an act of duty. It would be the final payment on your debt, dying while fighting the great enemy. Then you look back at Schaefer. He is still there, arrogant and untouchable in his command vehicle. A different option presents itself, an act of pure, undiluted rebellion, a final, personal message. Your grenade would likely do no more than scratch the Chimera's paint, but it would be a gesture, a final sin, a final act of defiance against the man and the system that used you, betrayed you, and discarded you. This would not be for the Emperor. This would not be for atonement. This would be for you. You look at Vol. You don't have to speak. He sees the grenade in your good hand. He sees you glance at the demon engine. Then at the distant Chimera. He understands everything. His bloody smile widens, and he gives you one last. So nod. Do it. You pull the pin with your teeth. The metallic tang sharp on your tongue. You ignore the roars though. If the demon, you ignore the scuttling horrors creeping at the edge of your vision. Your entire universe contracts to 2 points. The grenade in your hand and the pristine, arrogant silhouette of Colonel Ran Schaefer with a final, guttural scream that is equal parts pain and rage. You push yourself to one knee and hurl the grenade with the last ounce of your strength. It soars through the air, a tiny, dark speck of vengeance arcing across the vast canvas of the battle. It is your final word, your ultimate heresy, your only true act of freedom. Time slows to a crawl. You watch your grenade, your final, desperate prayer of hate, as it tumbles through the air. It is a beautiful, perfect arc, but your throw, weakened by injury and exhaustion, falls short. It does not reach the Chimera. Instead, it lands amidst the cadre, elite bodyguards forming a protective cordon round the vehicle. The explosion is insignificant in the grand symphony of war that surrounds it, but it is brutally effective in its own small way. 3 of Schaefer's personal guard are torn apart, and the colonel himself is forced to duck back inside his vehicle for cover. You have Eve nothing of tactical value, but you have thrown a rocket the god emperor of your own small hell. You have made him flinch. A bloody, triumphant laugh escapes your lips, turning into a racking coo that sends fresh agony through your chest. Your final act of defiance does not go unanswered. Through the smoke and your own fading vision, you see a figure detached from the chaos near the command vehicle. It is a commissar, his black coat immaculate, his bold pistol already drawn. He ignores the raging battle around him, ignores the roaring demon engine being engaged by Lehman Russ tanks. His entire focus, his entire world, has narrowed to you. He begins to walk towards you, his pace steady and unhurried. A black-clad priest coming to deliver the final sacrament of death. There is nowhere to run. You have no strength left to even crawl. You lie back in the rubble, the hard edges of the broken ferrocrete pressing into your back. The sounds of the battle begin to warp and fade, replaced by the high-pitched whine of your own dying nervous system. You look up at the sky, a canvas of roiling black smoke and angry orange fire. Beside you, Vol is gone, his bloody smile the last, then to fade into the grey reality of death. You are alone. The Commissar's footsteps are a slow, steady drumbeat, growing closer. Thump, thump, MP, thump, the rhythm of your own execution. As you lie there, waiting, a final, gentle tearing sound comes from your ruined sleeve. The tiny Aquila charm, your secret anchor for so long, finally breaks free from its hiding place. It falls from your wrist and lands in the bloody mud beside your head. You stare at it. This bent, tarnished piece of metal. You had poured so much into it, your hope, your sanity, your desperate, foolish belief in a just and merciful emperor. But the emperor was not merciful, and the Imperium was not just. It was a machine, and you were fodder. The only meaningful thing you did in its service was an act of pure, selfish rebellion. The charm is not a holy relic. It is a child's trinket, and its promises were empty. The commissary. Vers, his boots stop inches from your head, and his shadow falls over you. He says nothing. He simply looks down, first at your broken form, then at the Aquila charm glittering in the mud. For a moment, you think he might show some flicker of understanding, some shared faith in the symbol of the Imperium. Instead, a look of cold contempt crosses his face. He raises his heavy, steel cap, boot, and brings it down with deliberate, grinding force directly onto the charm. The metal squeals and shatters, crushed into meaningless fragments and driven deep into the mud. He has not, Saint, come to kill you. He has come to obliterate every last trace of what you were. He raises his bold pistol. You look into the weapon's massive, dark barrel and feel a strange, final sense of peace. Your debt is about to be paid in full. The last thing you see is the flash. The citadel of the apostate fell. The battle was a great victory for the Imperium, a testament to the courageous sacrifice of the Astra Militarum. Colonel Jaron Sheffer was lauded for his brilliant, if unorthodox, strategies, particularly his use of the 13th Penal Legion in the final decisi. The charge, the Legion itself was functionally annihilated. Its purpose served. Its debt in the eyes of the Departmentum Unitorum paid. Sheffer would be assigned a new batch of last chances on a different world, and his perfect, self-correcting machine of war and atonement would continue its grim and necessary work. The Penal Legions are the ultimate expression of the Imperium's brutal pragmatism. They are the lives that have been judged worthless, given one final chance to have value as ammunition. They are the sinners sent to fight horrors, the faithless sent to die for a faith they no longer possess. For every celebrated hero whose statue stands in the great halls of terror, for every glorious victory recorded in the annals of history, there is a foundation of 1,000,000,000 unmarked graves. Graves filled with souls like yours, souls who were promised redemption but were given only a grinder. Theirs is the true story of the Imperium. Story written in blood and betrayal, on a debt that can never be paid, only endlessly, brutally collected.